If you've ever heard someone say that a job won't make you rich, I want you to know that they're not wrong, but they're also not telling you the full story. And the part they're leaving out is actually the most important part of the entire conversation. A job by itself will not make you wealthy. That is true. If you simply clock in, collect your paycheck, spend it, and repeat that cycle for 40 years, you will not end up financially free. You will end up dependent, tired, and vulnerable, which is exactly what the critics are warning you about. But here's what nobody seems to mention. A job, when you understand how to use it strategically, is one of the most powerful wealth-building tools that exists. It gives you capital, it gives you an education, it gives you a network, and it gives you a stable platform from which to build assets that will eventually outgrow the job itself. The problem is not the job. The problem is that most people were never taught how to leverage a job for anything beyond a paycheck. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through the entire picture. First, I'm going to make sure you deeply understand why a job alone cannot make you wealthy, because if you don't fully internalize that, you won't have the urgency to do the second part. And then I'm going to show you exactly what your job gives you that smart people use to build real, lasting, independent wealth. The kind of wealth that gives you options and freedom and the ability to walk away whenever you choose. By the end of this, you won't see your job the same way again. You'll either see it as a trap you're finally ready to escape, or as a launch pad you've been standing on your whole career without realizing it. Let's get into it. Let's start with the uncomfortable truth, the part that stings a little but needs to be said clearly. A job is a transaction in which you exchange your time, your energy, and your presence for money. That is the fundamental structure of employment, and it has not changed since the concept of working for someone else was invented. You show up, you perform tasks that create value for the organization, and in return, you receive a predetermined sum of money on a predetermined schedule. The arrangement works beautifully as long as you keep showing up and the organization keeps needing you. But the moment either of those conditions breaks, the money stops. If you get sick and can't work, the money stops. If the company restructures and eliminates your position, the money stops. If an algorithm or a machine or a younger, cheaper, equally skilled replacement renders you redundant, the money stops. There is no continuity, no residual payment, no ongoing ownership of the value you helped create. You are renting your existence to someone else, and the rental payments cease the instant the lease is terminated. That is not wealth. That is a subscription to your own life, and the subscription can be canceled by the other party without your consent. Now, this would be concerning enough on its own, but the real danger is what happens to your life around this arrangement. Human beings are adaptive creatures, and when money flows consistently, we adapt our spending to match it. It starts innocently. You get your first decent salary, so you move into a nicer apartment. Then you finance a car that feels appropriate for your new status. You start eating at better restaurants, buying better clothes, taking vacations that reflect your income level. None of this feels reckless because the money keeps coming and everyone you know is doing the same thing, and society has told you your entire life that enjoying the fruits of your labor is the entire point. But what's actually happening underneath the surface is that your lifestyle is expanding to consume every dollar you earn, and in many cases more than you earn. Because credit is easy and optimism is seductive, and the future always feels secure when the present is comfortable. You get a raise, and instead of creating space between your income and your expenses, you simply recalibrate your lifestyle upward. A bigger house, private school for the kids, a luxury SUV lease, premium everything. And before you realize what's happened, you no longer need your income just to enjoy life. You need it to survive. You have constructed a financial identity that requires a constant, uninterrupted flow of high income to sustain itself, and that income comes from a single source that can be taken away at any moment. This is how you end up with doctors making $400,000 a year who are 2 missed paychecks away from financial disaster. This is how you end up with executives who look wealthy but are actually fragile, their entire net worth tied up in a job that owns them far more than they own it. They are not wealthy. They are expensive, And the distinction matters more than almost anything else in personal finance. Wealth is not measured by how much money passes through your hands. It is measured by the assets you own that generate income independently of your labor. It is ownership of things that pay you while you sleep, while you travel, while you take a year off to do nothing at all. If you do not own assets, if you do not have investments producing cash flow, if you do not have equity in income-generating systems, then you are not wealthy no matter how impressive your salary looks on paper. You are simply a well-paid employee with a well-funded lifestyle, and that lifestyle is one layoff away from collapsing into an entirely different reality. The wealthy understand this distinction down to their bones. That's why they say a job can't make you rich, not because they look down on work, but because they understand the mechanics of dependency. They understand that if you need your paycheck to survive, you are not free. You are bound. You are tethered. And the tether is just decorated nicely enough that most people don't notice it until it yanks them backward. But this is where so many people make the critical mistake of throwing out the entire concept of employment in response to this reality. They hear that a job can't make them wealthy, and they internalize that as a job is bad. A job is a trap. A job is something to escape immediately at all costs. And that reaction, while emotionally satisfying, is strategically bankrupt. Because a job, when approached with the right mindset, is not the obstacle to wealth. It might be the single greatest vehicle for wealth creation available to the average person. The problem has never been the job itself. The problem has always been what people do, or more accurately, what they fail to do, with the resources their job provides them. A job is a platform, and like any platform, it can become a cage if you stand still on it, or a launch pad if you use it to propel yourself higher. The difference is entirely in how you think about it and what you choose to build while you're standing on it. The first thing your job gives you, and the most obvious once you start looking at it through this lens, is capital. Consistent, recurring, predictable capital that shows up in your bank account every single month regardless of market conditions, regardless of whether your ideas are working yet, regardless of how the economy is performing. This is the kind of funding that entrepreneurs desperately chase. The kind of stable financial foundation that allows for long-term thinking and patient execution. Most small businesses fail not because the idea was bad, but because the founder ran out of money before the business had time to become profitable. They launched with enthusiasm and then suffocated under the pressure of needing immediate revenue to survive, making short-term decisions that sabotaged their long-term potential. The person with a job does not face this pressure. They can fund their investments and their side ventures from a place of security. They can think in years instead of weeks. They can afford to be wrong, to experiment, to learn, to pivot, without the existential terror of not knowing how they'll pay rent next month. Every paycheck is a funding round, and most people treat it like it's just spending money, burning through it on consumption and lifestyle upgrades and things that lose value the moment they're purchased. But when you shift your mindset and start seeing your paycheck as capital to be deployed rather than rewards to be consumed, everything transforms. You are no longer working for a living. You are working for ammunition. And ammunition, deployed strategically and consistently over time, builds empires. The second thing your job gives you is an education, and this one is so undervalued that it's almost invisible to the people receiving it. You are standing inside a functioning business, watching it operate from the inside, and you are being paid for the privilege of observing. You see how decisions get made at every level, from the executive suite to the front line. You witness how revenue is generated, how customers are acquired and retained, how products move from concept to market, how teams are assembled and managed and sometimes mismanaged, how conflicts are resolved or ignored, how corporate politics function, how budgets are allocated, how leadership communicates during crises, how organizations adapt or fail to adapt when the market shifts. This is not abstract theory from a textbook. This is live, real-time exposure to the inner workings of actual commerce, and you absorb more than you realize simply by being present and paying attention. Most employees spend their careers complaining about the dysfunction around them without ever stopping to realize that every piece of dysfunction is a lesson. Every broken process you observe is teaching you what not to replicate in your own ventures. Every smart strategy your company executes is a blueprint you can borrow. Every mistake your manager makes is a case study you didn't have to pay tuition to study. Every negotiation you witness, every product launch you participate in, every customer complaint you hear, every financial report you have access to, it's all education. It's all building a mental model of how business actually works in the real world, not how it works in motivational speeches, but how it actually works when money is on the line and consequences are real. The people who leave their jobs with nothing but a final paycheck and a sense of relief squandered that education. They spent years inside a learning laboratory and walked away with nothing to show for it but a resume. The people who leave with accumulated insight they can apply to building their own assets got their education for free, or more accurately, they got paid to receive it, and that knowledge compounds in value for the rest of their lives. Then there is the third asset your job provides, which is your network. The people you work with, the clients you serve, the vendors you interact with, the industry contacts you accumulate over years of showing up and being competent and building a reputation for reliability. These relationships are not trivial. They are economic infrastructure. They are people who know your work ethic, people who trust your judgment, people who have seen you perform under pressure, people who would take your call if you reached out, people who might one day become partners or clients or investors, or the person who mentions your name in a room you're not in when an opportunity appears. Building a network from scratch, when you have no institutional affiliation and no track record and no shared history with anyone, is slow and difficult and requires proving yourself to strangers who have no reason to give you the benefit of the doubt. Your job drops you into an existing network and pays you to strengthen it every single day. The coworker you help on a project today might be the person who funds your business in 5 years. The client you go above and beyond for today might be the person who hires you as a consultant when you eventually strike out on your own. The vendor you build a genuine relationship with might be the person who introduces you to the connection that changes everything. Most people leave their jobs, and their network stays behind because they never invested in it beyond the transactional requirements of their role. But if you nurture those relationships intentionally, if you build genuine connections and maintain them over time, you walk away from your job with something far more valuable than severance. You walk away with a web of people who know you, trust you, and want to see you succeed. These three things, capital, education, and network, form a foundation that most aspiring entrepreneurs would do almost anything to have. And yet the vast majority of employees let all three go to waste because they are too focused on the emotional experience of having a job, the stress, the boredom, the feeling of being controlled, the resentment of a boss who doesn't appreciate them, to see the strategic opportunity that is sitting right in front of them every single day. They treat their job as something to survive rather than something to leverage. And that single distinction, survival versus leverage, endurance versus strategy, victim versus architect, is what separates the people who work for 30 years and retire exhausted with a gold watch and a prayer that their savings last from the people who use their jobs to build genuine, lasting, independent wealth that gives them options and freedom and the ability to walk away whenever they choose. The mechanism for doing this is not complicated, though it requires discipline and patience and the willingness to look boring for a while everyone around you is busy looking impressive. You start by freezing your lifestyle, not by living in poverty or denying yourself every pleasure, but by drawing a line and refusing to let your expenses continue climbing in lockstep with your income. You create a gap between what you earn and what you spend, and you protect that gap aggressively because that gap is the seed of everything that comes next. You take the surplus and you deploy it systematically into assets, not into consumption, not into status symbols, not into things that look like wealth, but are actually just expensive liabilities that drain your cash every month. You deploy it into broad market index funds that compound silently in the background while you sleep. You deploy it into real estate that generates rental income and appreciates over decades. You deploy it into a side business that leverages the exact skills your job has already taught you, serving clients in the exact industry you already understand deeply. You deploy it into intellectual property, into equity, into anything that pays you without demanding your hourly presence in return. You start small, and you stay consistent, and you let time do what time does for people who are patient enough to let compounding work its quiet, unglamorous magic. And over the years, something begins to shift. The income from your assets starts to cover more and more of your expenses. At first, it's barely noticeable, a trickle that pays for a dinner or a phone bill. Then it grows. It covers your car payment, then your mortgage. Then it reaches a threshold that most people never experience in their entire working lives, where your assets are generating enough income that you could survive, maybe not extravagantly, but sustainably, without your job. And the moment that threshold is crossed, even if you never actually quit your job, even if you stay for another decade because you genuinely enjoy the work or the people or the sense of purpose it provides, you are fundamentally free in a way that your coworkers are not. The power dynamic has shifted. You are no longer there because you have to be. You are there because you choose to be. And that changes everything about how you show up, how you negotiate, how you handle stress, how you make decisions, how you experience your life when you walk out the door at the end of the day. The fear is gone. The desperation is gone. The quiet, gnawing anxiety about what would happen if the restructuring email arrived is gone. You have options, and options are what wealth actually is. This is the full picture that the critics leave out when they tell you that a job won't make you rich. They're right that the job by itself, the paycheck with no strategy, the income with no conversion into assets, will not build wealth. It will build dependency, and dependency dressed up in a nice salary is still dependency. But they're wrong to imply that the job is the problem. The job is a tool. It is a source of fuel. It is an education you get paid to attend. It is a network you get paid to build. It is a stable platform from which to launch assets that will eventually outgrow the platform itself. The problem has never been the job. The problem has always been what people do with the resources the job places in their hands. Most people spend them. A few people deploy them. And that distinction, that single difference in behavior and mindset, is the difference between being a high-paid slave who looks wealthy and being a genuinely free person who actually is wealthy. The job is not your enemy. Your own ignorance, your own complacency, your own unwillingness to learn how money works and then act on that knowledge, those are your enemies. And the beautiful thing about enemies like that is that you can defeat them without quitting anything. You can defeat them starting today, right where you are, with the paycheck you already receive and the skills you already have and the opportunities you are already surrounded by. You just have to decide that you're done being a passive recipient of your income and ready to become an active architect of your wealth. That's the shift. That's the whole secret. And now you know it.